Hey, this is John Young. Just wanted to say this is part two of a two-part interview with Jim Reynolds from Pulsar Systems. And we had a terrific interview with Jim and just felt like, yeah, there was too much good material. So we have two interviews that run about 15 minutes. Hope you enjoy it. Thanks. Well, one of the things I was thinking about is, what kind of social platforms do you use there at Pulsar yourself? I mean, you've got one, obviously, you use your own platform, but what kind of other tools do you augment with?
Our tools predominantly Pulsar, which is pretty exciting, but a big piece of our own platform is being able to import first-party data into our platform and normalize that across data sets. So when we look at our technologies like Google Analytics, Intercom, and other disparate digital measurement tools, when we look at our use cases of dog fooding our own technology, it's truly understanding what the technology is, what the outcome of the technology is, and in turn, how that data can be utilized to understand our business goals. So for us, much like any B2B enterprise technology company or software company, for us, it's understanding who we compete with. Again, how does the technology get us that information? So may it be competitive analysis, may it be understanding competitive positioning, may it be looking at our own content performance, or generally around what our industry looks like. Our whole suite of technology looks at that, as well as using first-party technologies like Twitter advertising, LinkedIn advertising, and how do we feedback the performance of those individual campaigns against the measurement of our own content versus the measurement of our competitors' content.
I wanted to ask, since we're on the whole aspect of tools and what you guys are using, as a professional, someone that's been doing this for a long time, Jim, how would you suggest, that early adopter type at a small organization that may not have access to these tools and things, but they know that there's power in this social data and able to kind of deliver that ethnographic view of things. Where would you suggest someone like that get started?
Much like you guys being an entrepreneur and helping fellow business holders out, it's one of those things that I am still so excited the amount of free technology that sits out there for folks. Looking at things like Google Alerts. So when we look at the tenets of what drives adoption for social media analytics, it all starts with social media monitoring. So with monitoring, you can look at the likes of things like Google Alerts. My former employer had a portal called Board Reader, which is a public search engine available to anyone for free, looking at the likes of a Hootsuite, looking at the likes of a TweetDeck. Anyone can start the listening process. And then from first-party tools like a Facebook Analytics, like an Instagram Analytics, like a Twitter Analytics, you can actually measure the impact of your content from that point and start to build out frameworks of understanding who is talking about my brand. And then from that, users can start to look at tagging of content, of being able to model against use case. So are you understanding competitive intelligence? Are you understanding your own personal CX? And there's lots of ways to do this in a very cheap way, as one eventually grows into paid platforms. But really that's my first starting point. But more importantly, and hopefully it came through clear enough on that point, it's building a framework for what you want to understand and modeling that framework of going, do I want to listen to my brand? Do we want to understand our product feedback? Much like any digital presence one would measure, from an individual entrepreneur to a multinational, multi-trillion-dollar a year company.
I'd love to learn what you think about the sort of innovations you think that are going to rise with that too, especially with the latest in data science, and what sort of innovations you might see happening there. Maybe even things that like Pulsar is, maybe looking to dive into or something like that.
When folks looked at this type of data 5-10 years ago, the bare minimum to entry was literally just the data, none of the attributes, none of the metadata attachment, none of the inferences, none of the enhancements like what you guys do on the Nichefire side of being able to add additional lenses to this content. So that's probably the first area where I point. Just having the data as a qualifier just simply isn't enough. So I would implore anyone listening to this podcast, challenge your provider, challenge them, of asking more of the data. How do you get it? Is it all of it? If it isn't all of it, what exactly it is, so you can square what the insight is based on available data of reach, of those given platforms. So the first enhancement that I see, though minimal, is getting a more complete set of data. So as the networks like a Facebook, like an Instagram, like a TikTok, will start to make a more complete version of this data set available, that's the number one innovation that I see that has to happen. Two, I go back to structure. As we teased to a little bit, and again, as what made me so excited for you guys is understanding the intent of what the data drives. What questions can be queried from it beyond trying to write a better query, trying to write a better keyword. You can only get so far by trying to shape your data set experience into that exact moment that matches a magical set of keywords. One of the things that we often talk about here at Pulsar is that your consumers aren't walking around with a thought bubble on top of their head saying, I have a Pixel 6, I have a Pixel 5. Consumers don't talk that way. People talk about the camera experience, the phone experience, the operating system. Technology needs to get better at identifying that experience. May it be on our side of discovering the right content for a consumer universe, or partnering with the likes of a Nichefire to better understand that point in customer experience. Better threading of content. The majority of these platforms have the ability to thread the content. Most platforms don't look at the interrelationship. Relevancy of timing of commentary is super important. And then once the data is structured and aligned, it all goes back to the visualization, driving available data sets directly aligned with the use case. If I'm a CX leader, I honestly don't care about paid ad performance. Why is my platform showing me those screens? And if someone is buying a universal platform, not to pick on companies that have just recently went public, why are certain users being exposed to certain modules that are non-relevant to your job? If we want to drive better acceptance across our industry, being social media monitoring, social media publishing, social media advertising, social media intelligence, put the relevant content in front of the relevant decision makers in their relevant environment at the appropriate time, and magically adoption will increase. I know we've all said on a number of webinars where the biggest issue impacting our industry as a whole is adoption, and it really comes back to overwhelming the users with too much data. If one of these solutions all of a sudden hit a Slack bot that put an alert in my inbox when it was relevant to me, guess what's going to be a much more used solution and goes from a nice to have budget to a mandatory budget. And technologies like these are driven by, insights and technology you guys develop. And when folks like us put those platforms in front of our clients, magical things can happen.
What do you think is the near answer here? Is it a matter of bundling consulting services with these tools?
From my findings over the last few years, and again, I'll speak a little bit to the transition of my experience working at SocialGist, that arguably was an upstream data, that is an upstream data provider servicing the vast majority of the social media analytics industry. Our biggest fear there was, are our customers properly ingesting our data sets to let the consumers understand? And then my current role here as a provider is driving that adoption. And in many times, no. A lot of these platforms are simply not doing enough to drive customer adoption. So to your ask, yes, all of these platforms need to get smarter on aligning expectations of consumer with outcome of technology and ensuring multiple checkpoints that, did this meet your organizational goal? Can it be enhanced? And even asking the simple question that I love that my team frequently does here, where we repeatedly ask our customers, great, you have this data. What report are you putting in and who does it go to and why? So then you're better appropriately matching the outcome. And if your outcome isn't aligned with the purchasing reason of the platform, there's a good chance the customer is going to waste money. And in no case should any customer in this industry be wasting money on technology just because their boss says they need to buy something and really not questioning, well, why?
Best practices or best ways to activate a certain insight, and understanding how to activate that insight, because I believe that could be, something that some of our viewers may be having trouble with, is like, wait, we got the insights, we think we know what to do. How do you activate this?
It really goes back to corporate governance. When we think about how this role emerged, it was so absolutely amazing. So back in 2009, when I started in the industry, you had a lot of random people just going, hey, there's this thing, social media. that we need to start thinking about right now. So it could be someone, a random active customer success agent. It could just be a smart marketing manager. One of the oddest ones that I had reach out to me during one of these campaigns was Jack Hittery. Jack Hittery used to run the X Lab, and he's like, hey, random guy in the internet, Jim, let me ask you a question. I'm working with this guy called Richard Branson. We're trying to monitor everything on the internet. Can you tell me what's happening? And I'm like, oh my God, dude, we're a 4-person startup. I'm talking to one of the original founding members of Google. Or we think about Steve Case in the beginning. Steve Case was one of my inbound leads back in 2009, going, hey, we're starting to look at technologies in this space. But think about how chaotic of a discovery to social media this was. Anyone who knew this thing was going to be the next best thing started to sniff around this market. Then all of a sudden it was taken over by marketing. And marketing is like, oh, it's just like media monitoring. We put it in a bucket, no one touches it, don't talk to anyone on social media. And we saw how effectively that worked. Not like governments got overthrown because of social media. Oh, they did. And then we think about the next level of adoption that occurred there, that, wait, maybe it's cross-functional. So we're going to write a 195-page social media policy around this. Well, yeah, clearly we've all followed our social media policies, because I think every employee in the world clearly identifies they're part of an employee now, right? Or would they be canceled? Who knows at this point? So when we think about the governance framework, that's still the same problem of how data and information flows in corporations. And shockingly, that problem still hasn't been solved yet. And I'm going to guess it probably isn't going to be solved for another 100 years. But you, as the data holder or the insight holder, need to think about your constituents, much like a politician. So in the case of your organization, if you're the holder or the hub of this data, how does your organization like to report on things? What's going to get the highest level of adoption? And then once you understand that reporting feedback, how do you repeat it? How do you repeat it? How do you repeat it? And then how do you normalize it?
On behalf of all the curious minds out there, we at Nichefire want to thank you, Jim Reynolds, Senior Director of Partnerships and Alliances at Pulsar Platform. And Jim, thank you so much for your time today. On behalf of Michael Howard, Khalil El Amin, co-founders of Nichefire, and myself, John Young. Jim, thanks again. It's great fun talking to you.
Thank you so much, guys.